Literary Hype. I am Stephanie, your literary hype woman, and today's author conversation comes to you all the way from Australia. Not me in Australia, just the author, by Zoom. I wish I was in Australia. That would have been fun, but no. Today's author is Ellie Marney. You might know her from her smash hit YA crime thriller novel, None Shall Sleep. And now she's got a new one that is called Some Shall Break. And I will tell you right now that it is a sequel, which I will bring that up here momentarily in the conversation as well. But this is a really fun chat about crime and psychology and like the criminal mind. So buckle up, because this is a good one. Thank you so much. Welcome to Literary Hype from the other side of the world. So your book that is coming out is called Some Shall Break. But I must say, for people who are coming across this that might not know, like I will give them the public service announcement from my personal struggle. This is a sequel.
Yes, it is. It's a sequel to None Shall Sleep, which came out in 2020.
Yeah, so that was real fun for me to like 3/4 of the way go to look something up and be like, oh, this is why I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah, that would be an issue. I mean, look, I think you can pick it up, but I think you'll get, you know, a deeper experience if you've read A None Shall Sleep first. Yes,
like it still was a very good book. It's just like once that I realized that, oh, there's details I am missing. I probably should have read the other one first. The struggle is real, like, because so many books now have covers that are similar by the same author.
Yeah,
that aren't necessarily related. So
and you have a lot of people. Yeah, you have a lot of people like writing maybe with different characters in the same world, and it can get a little bit confusing. But yeah, but Some Shall Break comes after this book, None Shall Sleep. So that was the first one, and then that one just took off in 2020 and hit the New York Times bestseller list, which was really cool. So I'm kind of hoping that, you know, when Some Shall Break finally arrives on the 6th of June, then yeah, people will be able to take it from there.
Yes. So with all that being said, this is kind of spoilery for the first book.
A little bit, yeah.
I'll try to avoid them as much as possible, but you know, if you haven't read the first book, there are some things that might come up in this conversation that are might spoil a little bit. So wanted to give everyone fair warning of what's going on here. With that being said, so go ahead and tell us a bit about where Some Shall Break picks up.
Okay, so in the original book, well, let me start from the beginning. So it's a serial killer thriller. It's set in 1982. In the original book, None Shall Sleep, 2 teenagers were recruited by the FBI to interview juvenile serial offenders. So this is back in 82 when the FBI was still doing wacky things like, you know, interviewing serial killers in prisons and mental institutions to find out more about their psychology and the way they used to work. Anyway, so in 82, we assume that they've hired these 2 teenagers to interview people that they can't really get information from as adult agents. You know, they hire teenagers to interview teenagers. But of course, the 2 teenagers involved get dragged into an active homicide case. And that's how kind of goes from there. So in book 2, one of the teenagers who was originally recruited, her name is Emma Lewis. She was originally found because she has unique insight on the psychology of serial killers. Basically, she is a survivor of abduction by a serial offender, so she's kind of like a real life final girl. And now she gets called back by the FBI and put under police protection when they realize that somebody is committing copycat murders, very much like the person who abducted her. So she and her partner, Travis Bell, who's a US Marshal candidate and whose father was killed by a serial offender, they have to solve this crime. She's, obviously being pulled back into a lot of past stress and trauma because of the nature of these crimes and how they echo the crimes from her past. And they get caught up with this very clever and manipulative juvenile sociopath called Simon Goodmanson, who influences both Emma and the course of the investigation.
There's so many serial killers at play here.
Yes.
Like
I should have just called this like a plague of serial killers.
like, so talk about the mentality that Emma has to build here, because she is dealing with so many different serial killers on a very personal level.
Yeah, she has already had this really full-on experience when she was 16. She survived that. She was abducted by a guy called Daniel Huxton. She wasn't his only victim. In fact, she was the last of his victims, and she was the one who escaped and ran for help. And so she thought she was out of that. She spent a number of years in recovery trying to get over that. And then when she gets pulled back into FBI investigations around the copycat murders, obviously this is really going to stress her out. But she's got that unique insight. She's got that window into the mind of the way somebody like this, how they would work, how they would behave, the kinds of thoughts that they might think. So that gives her a really unique perspective, and which is something that the FBI are very reluctant to let go of.
Talk a bit about your research process, because this is a very complex book with the serial killer conversations, with some sibling dynamics that are a little strange that we'll talk about in a minute. The FBI and just like crime scenes. Like, talk about your research process into all of these different areas.
All of my books seem to be really research heavy, which is great, because I love, like every writer alive, I'm probably one of those people who finds a rabbit hole and just dives into it feet first. But I did a lot of research for this one around the FBI. I contacted the FBI. They actually have a PR department that deals with writers and screenwriters and filmmakers and things like that. So anybody who has that kind of face out contact with the FBI, you have to go through their PR department. So I was in touch with them, and I was also kind of trawling through blogs of people who'd trained at Quantico to find out a little more about it. And because this is historical, I had to dig around a little too and find out a bit more about the history of the Bureau and what that would mean, what the kind of background politics of it all was at the time. Because 1982, behavioral science was really just in its infancy. It had only been going for about 10 years. And that was really fascinating. That was John Douglas, Mindhunter, The Silence of the Lambs, all of that stuff sort of came about through this new discipline, I guess, of profiling psychology. So that was something that was really, look, that is an area that has fascinated me since I was, in my early 20s and first read Mindhunter. And so I did a lot of reading on this. Some very disturbing reading also around the incidents of juvenile serial killers and, how young a lot of these people start, which was, both disturbing and scary. And I also had some contact with a specialist therapist who works with victims of extreme trauma, because it was really important to me that I get Emma's real experience down on the page so that people had an understanding of what she was going through, and also the process that she was going through to try and recover from this. So I have a friend whose mother is a specialist trauma therapist, and she's in the UK. So I contacted her and said, look, I'm writing these scenes. Would you be able to have a look at them for me? And she very kindly agreed to give me some feedback on, you know, scenes where Emma is talking to a therapist or where she's really going through it, you know. So that was really important. I was really very, very grateful that I got the chance to work with somebody who could advise me on that.
What sparked your inspiration and interest in this kind of storytelling area?
My interest and inspiration is like, well, I don't know, maybe I'm just weird. It's funny because I'm not really into true crime I mean, I do listen to some true crime podcasts, but I've always been fascinated in that behavioral science unit aspect, the criminal profiling aspect of the FBI. And like I said, I read Mindhunter, I think back when I was like 20, 21. And, you know, it just seemed fascinating to me. I was completely fascinated both by the idea that you could psychologically profile an offender and then catch another offender, you know, having had that experience, and having achieved some insight. But I was also just really intrigued by the psychology of the detectives, you know, because I mean, I know a lot of people are really fascinated by serial killers. We all seem to be completely, as a culture, fascinated by these strange minds, which is kind of understandable because they're, you know, those sorts of people have very different mental processes to you and me. It makes them very unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to do next. It's really interesting. But I'm also really fascinated by the psychology of the detectives involved because, you know, I mean, it's like you woke up one morning and you were like, okay, I'm going to start a book blog. And these people woke up one morning and were like, okay, I'm going to devote my life to the most intense, dark, you know, psychologically messed up stuff that the world has to offer. It's like, I'm not quite sure how you come to that point, but I'm completely fascinated by it.
In writing about these dark things, how do you take care of yourself and your mental health?
Yeah, I have to step back a little bit sometimes if I'm writing something really intense. I particularly find it hard to write the villains, the killers in my books. So I often leave those scenes until the end of the story, which is kind of weird. Particularly where there's some point of view shots in None Shall Sleep, and then in fact, the first scene in Some Shall Break is of a woman who's been recently abducted, and then she realizes what situation she's in. And it took me a long time to write that stuff because I just find it really, you know, it's distressing, and very disturbing. I like to hug my kids and just debrief a little bit, go and watch some, you know, Bridgertons or something, just to have a bit of a break.
So there's a quote, there was a couple quotes that really stood out to me. One of them is, does she need to be strong for you to feel comfortable? So talk a little bit about how just, even though she's been through so much, she's still trying to be the strong one, and how that is just kind of ingrained in women to like, oh, I'm fine all the time. And like, what was it like for you writing from that perspective?
100%. I love that you picked up that line. I think it's you know, it's part of our day-to-day life that women are expected to kind of shoulder the emotional burdens as well as a lot of the physical labor of householding. And if you're in a relationship, you know, you're the one who's kind of got to do the emotional juggle. And yeah, Emma has this psychology where she feels like she has to be controlled and strong, and it's important for her that, you know, for her ongoing recovery, that she she has to learn how to cope with the idea that she might not be able to be strong. She has a partner, Travis Bell, who has been working with her, since the first book. And he is placed in a position in this book where he starts to question a couple of the assumptions that he might have made about Emma herself and about victims who have been through recovery and come out the other side. So, he's trying to figure out what it's like to be a survivor. There's a few scenes in the book where he has a chance to communicate with Emma's therapist, where she sort of, and the whole time in this book, he's trying to work out is there any way I can make this better for her? Since the first book, they start as very good friends, mutual partners. They help each other out. They give each other support. Travis is basically like Emma's second in command, like she's the general and he's her lancer, and he's the go-to guy. And it interests me in this book to see what it would be like if he was in a position where he was like, well, I can't just be doing things, I've actually got to be also thinking about what she needs emotionally. And because of that kind of development, they start to find a new level for their emotional relationship, which is, really nice to write.
Their relationship evolves quite a bit. And it
does.
Very entertaining. But the other really core relationship of this is Simon and Kristen.
Oh, yeah.
That one just it was so creepy and weird. What was it like coming up with this weird twin connection between this normal girl and this sociopathic boy?
I mean, you've got Emma, you've got this really interesting dynamic in the book, I think, where you've got Emma and Travis who are having this slowest of burns, slow build emotional connection, and they're finding new ways to communicate with each other all the time. And, then you've got Simon Goodmanson, who is an incarcerated serial killer, who is a mass murderer. He's killed 11 people. And he's got this very, very, very creepy and inappropriate emotional relationship with his twin sister, Kristen, who is, also a survivor in her own way. Imagine growing up with someone like that, who's got that kind of psychology. And she's developed all of these unconscious strategies for dealing with it as well. She doesn't realize, how affected she's been. And she just idolizes her brother. They grew up in this very stilted, formal, upper class, situation where there wasn't a lot of affection. There wasn't a lot of effective parenting. It was kind of like, well, you can have everything you want, but you can't have a connection within the family. You can't have an emotional life. You're kind of like an object art, in this grand mansion instead of a kid. So they've both experienced that. And Simon has, because he's a very, very clever person, he's basically turned that into a strategy for how to manipulate people. He's learned very well how to manipulate to get what he wants. Kristen has kind of turned into this person who has this very, I don't know how you'd describe it. She's got this very amorphous kind of chameleon type personality where she just she's very empathic. She takes on the emotions and feelings of people around her. But because of this weird relationship with Simon, they both feel like nobody gets them except them, So somebody described it as they're each other's sun and moon, which is, it's very weird. They're like the yin yang symbol, And Simon is very dark, and Kristen has all of the nice lightness and brightness and airiness. I think we have a history of very strange incesty siblings. If you look down through the ages, I was trying to track it. The idea that we have these, we are slightly obsessed, particularly with blonde twins. Like if you think back to Chris and Kathy, if you think back to, you know, Jamie and Cersei in Game of Thrones, Flowers in the Attic. If you think back to, Donna Tartt's The Secret History, you've got these blonde siblings in that book as well, who have these, are they really like that? So I like to think of Simon and Kristen as continuing in that tradition.
Now that you mentioned Cersei and Jamie, I'm like, oh, that was, yeah, that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So in case anybody hasn't caught on by your accent, you are not from America. So what were some of the challenges of writing a book set in a country that you don't live in?
That was, you know, I spent so much time on Google Maps looking at roads. I was like, you know, my partner would get home from work and I'd be like, come over here, honey. We're going to look at like 4 hours of people driving through Washington, D.C. on YouTube. I have spent some time in the US. I actually have not been to Pittsburgh, but I have a friend who used to live there. And I mean, I think I have a certain amount of latitude because it's set back in 1982. So some of the old landmarks, you know, some of the buildings, for instance, that I mentioned in Some Shall Break, no longer exist. The old Pittsburgh police station was razed and turned into a public park. There's a few other buildings in town that have just, you know, the whole outlook of the town, of the city has completely changed. So that was really interesting. I had to really crawl through all of these online articles, websites, photos. I tried to find pictures of people driving through Pittsburgh in that time because, yeah, it's a slightly different skyline. Everything's a little bit different.
And there is a character in this book that I have to ask about.
Oh.
Is Jack Kirby, did you name that character in honor of the DC Comics legend?
That is so funny.
Are you a comics nerd and you're just like subtly telling us?
No, I think that is actually totally unconscious, because I wrote that and it wasn't until I submitted it and then my editor was like, "Oh, did you know that there's a comics connection here?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I did that."
The first time that was mentioned, I was like, "Oh, are we getting into comic territory? Is this gonna go no?" But no, it did not go that direction. But I just had to ask.
I totally did not get that until after it had already gone to print. And I was like, "Oh my God, should I change it?" And my editor was like, "Oh no, it'll be all right. Just leave it. It'll be fine." No one will notice.
It's a great little Easter egg. It's just a little like, So you have a little book club that you've started, the Love Oz YA book club. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I love Oz YA book club. About 2015, there was a bit of movement in the Australian publishing industry to advocate for and promote Australian books, Australian YA books, which I think is really important in especially in a small market like we have here. It's good for Australian kids to be able to see themselves reflected in their own literature. And we realized that actually there just wasn't really enough awareness out there of what local YA authors were doing. You know, we have some pretty amazing people here, and I feel like they're punching well above their weight on the international stage. So we've got people like Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. We've got C.S. Pacat, Lily Wilkinson, a number of people, Kate Armstrong, who is a US expat who now lives here in Australia. So we've got a number of people who are really producing some amazing stuff. And I thought it would be really nice if we could highlight that. So we started on Facebook with Love Oz YA Book Club, and it grew and grew and grew into this 900 plus membership on Facebook, which was really amazing. And now we've just transferred over to Instagram. So if you look up hashtag LoveAusYA book club, you'll find us. And yeah, we just read one Australian YA book a month, and we try and dive back into some old books as well. So it's not just, you know, contemporary releases. We check out some Australian YA classics as well.
It's really cool to see authors kind of embracing the love of books from their country. It's like being an American. Like I have some Australian bookstagrammer friends, and it's whenever they post something, and I'm like, oh right, like Australian has its own publishing industry. I keep forgetting about this. So it's good to
That's
see
right.
the love being shared for those as well.
I think it's really nice, you know, also to kind of share around some titles that you may not encounter otherwise, you know, like we've just got so many good writers here. It's freaking me out, you know. We had Isabel Carmody, Garth Nix. We've just got this, you know, this field of stars, and some of them are coming into US and UK markets now and just going wild. So I mean, I think it's really important to remember back. You know, it's like that old slogan, you know, about buy local so that you support local industry. I think it's really important to encourage people to check out what they've got in their own backyard.
So what are you working on next? There needs to be a certain thing happening.
It's like, how much do we want to tell people?
I'm like, do I say it outright? Do I not?
Well, look, I think
hint.
I think we might see another book in the Nudge or Sleep sequence coming. I'm really hopeful. I am kind of in the middle of writing that one at the moment. It will just, you know, it sort of depends on how it all flows. I love these characters, and I would like to keep working with them a little bit, even if we do a little spin-off or something like that, which would be really fun. But there are an awful lot of intense work. So, you know, because I just love writing these in full-on intense books, I've started writing another book, which is maybe well, it might even be more intense. I started writing a horror novel, which is really fun. I'm finding it really fun, but also really hard. It's not that I'm unfamiliar with the genre at all. I actually really love horror as a genre and read a lot in horror. I am a complete wimp though when it comes to horror movies. So I'm one of those people who is like, I can read as much horror fiction as you can throw at me, but you know, invite me to the cinema to see a horror movie, and I'm just like crawling under the seat.
Understandable. Some of them are a little intense.
They are. My oldest son wanted me to come with him to go and see Smile, and I was like, I just absolutely, yeah, no. Thank you for that invitation.
I would love to hang out with you, but
I am a massive wimp. So yeah, I'm enjoying writing that. I love horror tropes. There's just something about, I know I'm not really a slasher type girl, but I am really into the final girl trope. I just love playing around with that trope, and I I'm really fascinated also by you know, one bad things happen, you know, when you get a group of people and one bad thing happens, and then there's just this this rolling effect where, yeah, the snowball keeps picking up snow as it rolls down the hill, and just things get worse and worse. I enjoy those kinds of tropes and seeing how the characters get out of them.
Sounds like we have some good times on the way in the future. And because this is literary hype, what books are you hyped about right now?
I am reading Amy Kaufman's The Isles of the Gods, which, you know, every now and again I dip into fantasy. I'm a big Leigh Bardugo fan, so I was so pumped to watch the Shadow and Bone series too. That was really a lot of fun. I So Amy's new book, The Isles of the Gods, has just come out. So I went to the launch for that, which was cool. And also, C.S. Pacat has the sequel to her book, Dark Rise, which is like YA fantasy. It's like it harks back to all of those old style English kind of fantasy novels like The Dark is Rising. And so I loved, the news that she was releasing the second book, which is coming out really soon. I'm very excited for that. Kate Armstrong's Nightbirds has just come out. That is super cool. That's like 1920s flappers with magic in an alternative universe, which is incredibly cool. And Lily Wilkinson's book, A Hunger of Thorns, has just come out. So, I'm totally into that as well. I mean, look, there's a million thrillers out there too. There's April Henry's just released Girl Forgotten. Margot Harrison's got a new book coming out, Only She Came Back. There's just too many. There's so many. Oh, Lying in the Deep by Diana Urban. Yeah, so but basically from that you can get a bit of an idea of how high my TBR pile is by my bedside table. It's ridiculous.
I mean, I feel that. I've got a whole wall. Forget a pile. I've got a whole wall.
It's crazy. I'm gonna turn into that ridiculous meme where somebody gets killed by their falling TBR pile. I really do have a big pile.
The bookshelf right behind me is getting loose from the wall, and I'm terrified.
That's not good. Don't die under an avalanche of books. That would be very.
I mean, but if there's a way to go for LiteraryHypeWoman, it would be under a pile of books.
It would definitely be under that.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and talking about your book, Some Shall Break.
It was such a delight to be here. I really hope you enjoyed Some Shall Break. I'm glad that you got to read it before time. And it's really nice to say hello from the future.
You like fantasy? Well, we got a little sci-fi going right now. Well, thank you so much. Thanks again to Ellie for getting up early on a Saturday morning to talk to me late on a Friday night so we could make this conversation happen. Working with time zones is really tricky, but we managed to get it done, and so thank you to Ellie for taking the time out of your weekend to talk with me about books. If you're interested in getting a hold of Ellie's books, those links are down below, as well as where to find her on social media and where to find me on social media so we can be friends. I would love to have more book friends. Don't we all need more book friends? We do. But while you're down that side of the screen, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell to turn on your notifications so you know when new videos are coming. And thank you so much for watching.